Friday, March 18th, 2022. You may remember about 2 months ago I did a video from the same spot chronicling the lightning strike that took place on this tree on December 29th. It hit about 80 feet up, somewhere in there. You can see the splintering, or it splintered all the way down, the lightning bolt, and knocked bark off. We talked about how it was apparent and quite clear that the lightning bolt came down, hit the tree. It tries to find the quickest path to ground, came to the bottom of the tree and found our buried underground spectrum line, which runs to the green tap. You can see the new tap in the distance. That's just been replaced in the last few weeks by Spectrum. And then it also went the other way underground, because the former buried underground cable runs this way to the side of our house. Most of the discharge hit the tap, which has that green pedestal on it. And again, that's a new one, and blew the old pedestal into at least 50 pieces up and down the street, some into our front yard. And then it went to the other side, and we showed you how it knocked the part of the Spectrum box off. It went into our line and found the Duke Energy ground lug and blew soil out of the ground and all that. But anyway, today just going over what Gorman lightning protection did. Mike Gorman and his team installed a full-scale lightning protection system and surge arrestor system for the home. Just want to review that real quick. So most of it is in the attic, and we're not going to video the attic because it may be a little dark up there, even with some lighting. But the way it works is there's about 400 feet of UL certified copper cabling, and most of it runs under the peaks of our attic. And you can see these little air terminals. You can see 5 right here run along the main longitudinal axis of the roof. There's 4 more up front that we'll show in a minute that go along 2 other faux peaks. But inside of those, in the attic space, they're connected to copper cabling. I'll show you a sample of that, or we'll just see a close-up rather here where it runs to. But these are all connected. Everything is connected. And one run inside the attic of copper cabling comes down through the attic and comes out through this soffit right here. And by the way, Mike and his team, I don't know if my Zoom's going to work that well, did a great job of doing little things like using caulk to seal the exfil points where the copper cabling comes out of the attic through the soffit. They sealed that with caulk, and they hid the cabling. I don't know if you can see that, but right behind the gutter, they hid it, and then it runs down behind the gutter here, and we'll do a close-up here in a second. But then it runs all the way down. You can see the cable hidden nicely behind this gutter. They had to take the gutter off temporarily so that they could hide it. But it runs down and connects here, and move the splash block and dirt to a 16-foot long copper grounding, I don't know the correct term, a grounding cord. It's rod, grounding rod. It's actually 2 8-foot grounding rods coupled together that goes 16 feet straight down in the earth. And there's other ones they put in too. That's not the only one. So walking around the house, I'm actually walking literally right along where underneath my feet that our buried Spectrum cable is, both the one that was basically destroyed by the lightning and the new one that Spectrum buried a few weeks later. Anyway, on this side, again, back on the roof, you can see the There's a total of 9 air terminals, or what some people call lightning rods. You can only see 5 from the back of the house, but they're connected to another series, the same cabling. One exit point is connected through the attic up here and comes down this gutter behind it, which had to be removed. And you can see behind here, and it there's another grounding cable 16 feet deep down, or grounding rod 16 feet down deep into the soil. And also it's bonded. There's cabling that runs buried underneath our pine straw, but it's bonded to a couple things. To our gas meter. The gas meter and the gas lines are all metal, so lightning could use that as an entry point, but that's bonded here as well into the entire system. And then Duke at my feet here has their own grounding rod. By code, every home has to have at least one grounding rod, and Duke, I think, uses just one standard rebar that's not as good as the copper grounding rods that Mike Gorman and his team installed. While we're here, I'm going to jump over to the surge arrestor system. That's kind of separate, but it's important to have both because it's hard to not have one or the other. You need to have both. But the surge arrestor system, this is a type 1 surge arrestor. This will handle surge, I think, somewhere in the order of 90,000 amps. In other words, if this can't handle any surge coming in through the electrical lines, it won't be able to handle anything. And one other thing here is our new Spectrum box that Spectrum replaced after lightning blew off the old one. In our previous video, we showed how the lightning came in under the old underground buried Spectrum line. Came up here, blew this door off, went in the house, knocked out the cable modem. Well, lightning will actually use the coax cable as an entry point. So new box, and Mike and his team, that's my lock, by the way, and the keys inside. But inside this, Mike and his team put a gas-filled coaxial surge arrestor. So next time lightning tries to do that again, as they say, the surge arrestor for the coax should stop that. And there's more things inside the house we'll get to later. But jumping back to the lightning protection system, we'll go around to the front and sides, and then we'll go back to the surge arrestor system. Here's a third grounding cable on this faucet or downspout, and you can see in the front here's 2 more lightning rods on this peak. And Mike's team actually had to knock an access point out to the main attic because this peak here is not accessible. It's sealed off, and there's not really any practical storage room anyway, so they just temporarily knocked a hole in there to run cabling underneath to connect these 2 grounding rods with the rest of the system. I'm sorry, these 2 air terminals to the rest of the other ones. And then another grounding cable and grounding rod is behind this gutter, and this grounding rod underneath this splash block goes 16 feet deep. And as always, Mike's team did an excellent job. You can see, if I try to zoom in there, they caulked in nicely where they had to have an exit point for the grounding cable. Wrapping up the exterior, there's one more peak, faux peak, where, like this peak here, not accessible from the main attic, but there's 2 more air terminals, 8 and 9. So there's a total of 9 air terminals, and underneath that peak, hidden in the attic, is more copper grounding cable, all connected, and a 4th grounding rod is here. I won't walk up to this one because you get the idea. But there's a 4th grounding cable installed here, 16 feet in the ground. So that's a total of actually 5 grounding rods, because remember, Duke Energy has to put theirs, and it's just basic rebar most likely susceptible to rust, and the rust puts resistance in the system, making it less conductive for lightning. And then 4 16 feet deep all copper grounding cables that Mike and his team put in. Those are all copper, rust resistant, and by the way, it's in clay, so clay tends to hold more moisture, so that should diffuse a lot of the ground in the event of another lightning strike. So switching back to the surge arrestor system, I showed you the type 1 on the main. There's now, Mike's team also put in a type 2 specific to my square D panel, because you have to match the manufacturer to the panel in case something were to go wrong. They won't honor the warranty. But this is a square D type 2. It really shouldn't be needed. The type 1 should handle it in case the lightning protection system and its 5 grounding rods can't discharge all of the surge, and some comes through the electrical lines. It should be stopped by the type 1 on the main. But here's a type 2, and this type 2 on the panel will definitely, hopefully, stop any residual. But that's not all. We're going to move inside lastly. So we won't go through everything on the inside because there's a lot on the inside. Basically, other than the attic is where most of the grounding cables are. Basically, on every outlet, there's type 3 surge protectors, or certainly where important stuff may go, like our Christmas tree will go there. And the Christmas tree got knocked out December 29th, its transformer. And then we have another type 3 for this TV that Mike's team put in. For the places that have a lot of stuff, like my office is the brainchild of the house when it comes to electronics, and this drop area closet, it has a bigger type 3 surge protector that they put in that handles more outlets. And then my office, still an even bigger type 3 surge arrestor. And this surge arrestor actually has USB ports and coaxial protectors. And this holds a ton of electrical outlets for my electronics, which is excellent. I had like 2 or 3 old school power strips. And it just was replaced by the one they put in. And you can see I have a lot of electronics. I have 2 custom-made METAR maps for piloting, plus work and personal electronics. I can't really deal with any more lightning surges, so here we are. Last thing on the inside, this home is a fairly new home where there's a lot of integrated Ethernet jacks. We have 6 Ethernet ports, 2 coax ports, and there maybe 1 phone jack. Phone jacks are kind of outdated, but the bottom line is surge can get any of that stuff, not just the electrical lines. So that all comes in to this closet on the on-cue panel, which Mike and his team did quite a bit of work here. You can see they put another type 3 surge protector with Spectrum's cable modem. So if you remember, on the outside of the house with a gray Spectrum box, there was a gas-filled coaxial surge arrestor inside of that, which should hopefully stop any surge that tries to come through the input line for Spectrum into our house. That comes in and hits here. At this type 3 surge protector, there's another coax, so if any residual surge is still coming through on the coax, this type 3 will hopefully stop it. Plus, Ethernet surge protectors go into the cable modem, as well as my router and Ethernet switch. Plus, another type 3 they put in, which has coax for the antenna. One last thing is, in my attic, I installed about 3 or 4 years ago an aerial digital TV antenna that goes way up in the attic. It's about 30 feet above the ground. It gives me excellent over-the-air digital TV coverage, in addition to streaming DirecTV stream and the usual streaming Amazon Prime and Netflix. And that needs protection too. So this has coax input because lightning could still try to arc to the metal antenna that's up in the attic. And Mike's team bonded that. I won't show you that because it'll take more time, but they use a piece of aluminum cable to bond off the existing copper grounding system. And that being that the TV antenna is made of aluminum and you can't use dissimilar metals. So they couldn't bond a piece of copper to the aluminum TV antenna above my head in the attic. So they just simply switched it over a piece to aluminum to bond it. But everything's bonded. The TV antenna, the electrical, the gas meter that we showed you. And then we even have protection for the coax coming off the TV antenna because that feeds several different outlets, coax outlets in our house. I said 2 coax. We actually have more than that for TV, plus the 6 Ethernet. That's all protected too. So quite a bit of stuff. Said it simply, if all this stuff doesn't stop or greatly limit any lightning damage or secondary or surge damage from a future lightning strike, nothing else will. That's just kind of the bottom line. This video's gotten kind of long, but one last comment. To put my Berks back on and roll outside to close off this video. So let's say we have a repeat of what happened December 29th. And in my view, it's very likely I'll have another lightning strike within the next 10 years. Certainly in the next 20 years. If it happens one time, everything's paid for itself. And then some. Because if we would have had a direct lightning strike, which there have been about a half dozen or so just in the last half of 2021 alone within 10 miles of my house, the home's usually burned down or several $100,000 in damage, and you're out of the house for 1 to 2 years while they repair or rebuild it. But let's say we have another lucky event, quotes, where it hits a tree close by, and we had about $9,801 in lightning surge damage with electronics. That's what our insurance claim came to, was just short of $10,000, even though fortunately the lightning did not directly strike the house. But let's say it did a repeat and hit this same tree again, let's say 6 years from now, it would probably come to the bottom of the tree as it looks for ground, and it would probably find the underground buried spectrum lines, either our new one that spectrum buried or the old one that was fried by the previous lightning strike. And it may travel along those, but some of it may actually try to find this 16-foot deep copper grounding rod and discharge through that, which would mitigate the damage to spectrum's underground line or lines and perhaps mitigate damage to their tap. And all that would be covered by Spectrum. That's their equipment. They repair it. But if it tried to come through the house on the side, we have 2 more grounding rods in addition to the Duke, plus the gas-filled coax surge arrestor in the Spectrum box if residual surge tried to come through on that. So that should all help as well. I'm more than confident it would eliminate or greatly diminish any surge damage if we had a repeat again of this tree being struck. All right, that's it. Hopefully that helps the next person considering a lightning protection and surge arrestor system. Thanks.